Good day, everyone. Thank you
Hi,
for
everybody.
joining again. Really appreciate you taking your busy schedule out and chat with us and sharing our insights in our cyber risk governance group. And today we have another special guest, Robert Castle, and he goes by Bob. So hi, Bob.
Hey guys, how's it
Hey,
going?
Bob.
Good to see you again.
Wow.
And I'm Stanley Lee, and with my business partner Sean Mahoney on the call. So today we're going to share more about what Bob's expertise in working with the C-suite, working with the board of directors. So I will let again Sean to do the introduction, and Bob, you can tell us more about your background.
So, Bob, if I have it correct, you are a more of a former technical, and now you're a refugee in the coaching space, right?
That's kind of right. Yeah. So I like to say I'm a leadership advisor, right?
There you go.
Yeah. So I really help technology executives transform from kind of overwhelmed firefighters to strategic visionaries, and so I
And
help
you were
them.
one of those. You were one of those firefighters at one time, as
I
a
was one of
CISO.
those fire. I made all the mistakes that I will talk about here.
Excellent,
Yes.
excellent. We like to teach people what not to do.
So yeah, today's session is more about in the business executive area, and we have put together the cyber risk governance system, and we have talked about the top down and bottom up approach. And just to clarify for our audience, the top down approach we referring as governance, risk, and compliance, and the bottom up is coming from the IT cybersecurity. And because what we've been talking about is this cybersecurity black hole, there's a lot of money spent onto
Yeah.
cybersecurity, IT. But unfortunately, a lot of business executives, they wondering, what, when am I going to stop spending on this? Well, you know what, they might never be able to spend, but stop spending. But what we're trying to do is how do we justify this as the process? And then aligned it with the organization's governance requirement, risk management, and of course compliance evidence, what we like to call it, is how can we in this process or multiple processes working towards getting some of the metrics to measure the justifications as well as the effectiveness in the operation, and those are what we call the North Star to cyber resilience. So, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sean. And again, going back into a little bit about the introduction, frame our conversation, what you will learn in this live event, and hoping Bob can answer some of your questions with his experience and insights.
Thanks, Stanley. So, Bob, when I was an executive of an organization, I had a very difficult time understanding why we needed to invest in cybersecurity tools. It was a cost center to me. I never had the budget for it. And now I speak to executives from outside their organization to help them understand why cyber isn't a cost center, but is an operational efficiency booster. And I do it from the outside. You're helping people do it from the inside. Give us some ideas of some of the things that they struggle with and how you help
Yeah.
them deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to the way that technology executives, were raised, right?
Right.
So that they're basically their technical skills open doors,
Mhm.
but leadership, right, builds their career. And so the journey is much more about, you know, uh, not about the technical skills. It's about transforming how technology leaders see themselves and their teams so that they actually have a business impact, right? And that's I think that's the underlying challenge that most technology executives are faced with, and that goes right into that discussion that you were starting to have.
Is it that they lack the ability to put it into a business value context?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of it is that, right, and some of it is soft skills, right. So let's take the business value context first. I think, There's I mean, from my perspective, there's a number of mental models that get technology leaders trapped in their
Hmm.
way of thinking. So, like, one of them is, well, being a crisis manager versus a strategic visionary, right?
Right.
Because it's addictive, man. When you solve problems, right, and you're the hero, it
Right.
feels good, man. It feels really great. Okay, but in order to be viewed as a leader in the boardroom, you've got to shift from that reactive firefighting to more proactive strategy development, right? Like you can probably imagine what are some of the best leaders you've seen, right? They have this air of confidence. They're like they're when they talk to their team and other executives are like, yeah, we got this. We're up for the challenge, right?
Right.
And you feel that, right? You feel that, and then um, you know when they go into the crisis mode, it literally erodes from that influence that they would have around the boardroom table. And they're in this crisis mode, and they're now a crisis manager. And again, it
Yeah.
feels good. That's how they got to where they are, by solving problems. Okay, but that's not going to keep them in around the boardroom table.
Do you often find that they sort of rely upon their toolbox, so to speak, to keep the organization secure without having to demonstrate the value of what they're doing?
Help me with what you mean by that. Their
Well, I mean,
toolbox, yeah, yeah.
oftentimes what we see is organizations will go and they'll buy tools
Oh,
and not truly understand the efficacy of the tools, the applicability of the tools to the specific organization. And oftentimes we even find them misconfigured. They went and bought the tool because it was recommended to them as this is a great tool, but they don't know how to use the tool. You know, so it's much like me wanting to do woodwork. I can go out and buy some of the greatest jigs out there, but if I don't know how to use it, I'm going to make just a bunch of sawdust.
yeah. I mean, you've seen those statistics, right? That out of every software product that is bought, only 10% of the features are actually used. And then I think in a lot of security applications, it's even less, unfortunately. Yeah. So that can be a huge issue, and I think it's more around. I think that issue is more around thoroughness, right? Of the executives team and their organization and their process for evaluating and then picking tools, right?
And getting the budget allocation and negotiating a good contract and a good price for that
Yes,
product
yes,
isn't necessarily a business value win for them as a business leader. They got
yes.
it for the technical toolbox, but it doesn't demonstrate that they're a value into the organization, to the C-suite as an advisor from cyber risk perspective. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And
And I would like to take a step back into
okay.
this, right? Because let's, yes, this conversation is good, but I think that we need to take a step back for our audience is talk about lots of money being spent into cybersecurity in the, it's been going on, and the black hole keep on spending, and to we're only getting about 10% efficiency, 20% efficiency from certain tools that already, or certain solutions that already spent in the organization. Are you telling me that I should throw them all away and then restart from over again? And of course, come on, face it, Sean, that you were my customer. You were NetSwitch customers for over 15, 16 years, right? Well,
Yep.
how many times I come and tell you, hey, Sean, we need to spend money on this, and then you, of course, naturally you would say, well, you challenge me with a bunch of questions. What is the value? What is it for? Great. Even though I can able to answer through the proposals, address with the scope of work, addressing everything that you ask. But after you spend the money, most of the time, and I'm one of them, it's like we just forgot about it. Don't just let on spending that money or the resource nurturing that tool, and I have no idea. And based on the past. That's why we put together this cyber risk governance system. Based
Yeah.
on the past, we just keep on spending, have no idea what we're spending on. And after a while, we've forgotten about it. And from the business executive point of view, you know what? 2 years later, you bring it back. Oh, we need to spend more money, or we need to buy maintenance, or we need to buy this and buy that. It's like, whoa, what have I got in the last 2, 3 years that I spend all this money? What have I got from these tools that is still sitting in the network?
You,
And then now you're asking me to buy more.
you need
And
to cut. You need to cut them out.
well,
You need
I
to
think it's
cut 'em out.
part of it. What we, yeah,
That's. I mean, what it comes down to, right, is the pace of technology is incredible, right? And what happens is there are multiple platforms that keep getting deployed within organizations, and then each of those platforms has preferred tools, and they never deprecate them, or and I won't say never, but it's challenging to go back and incur that technical debt, deprecate, the platform, and then you can recover that savings, right? But that requires a kind of a sophisticated enterprise architecture approach, and depending on the size of the organization, you have to be very disciplined about that. Otherwise, you're right, costs are going to get out of control, and it's very very hard to get out of those situations once you get there.
Yeah.
part of what we talked about is the 4 stage of the strategy, right? Being passive, reactive, proactive, and then adaptive.
Hmm.
And we also have been talking about it, about the changing the narrative, changing the culture, how we're shifting from what I just talked about as an example, and Bob, you illustrated, is more like a passive role. And how can we shifting this, and that's where your expertise comes in. How can we advise the business executive to look at it from a more adaptive approach, and then try to balance between the operational efficiency and then the operational effectiveness with the cost efficiency? And that's why we're having this conversation, is what kind of metrics would you use? Because firefighting mode is very passive, and at the same time a lot of money spending onto it, and you have suggested let's take them out. But what would you recommend, how to evaluate whether they are operational effective? If they are not, how can we take it out? Because there's always going to be that learning curve, and which people needs to be aware of. So what would your recommendation? How do you start by looking at those existing tools, what is being effective or not?
Yeah, well, I think it starts right in your KPI development. And so I've got some things to say about this, right? Everybody's heard about SMART goals before, right?
Yeah.
Specific, measurable,
Yeah.
actionable, relevant,
Yeah.
time bound, et cetera, right? And then, a lot of companies are implementing OKRs, so objectives and key results. Right? I kind of like that approach better, and for a couple of reasons. It basically breaks the KPI into 2 statements: an objective statement, which is like the what and the why, right? And that why is really important. And then it gets down to the key measurements, right? And most of the time, right, people get wrapped around the, axle around the measurements. But in order for business leaders or technology leaders, and specifically, to be influential, right, they need to talk in business terms, not technical terms. So, and another way of saying this is, don't be boring. Right? I mean, right. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but right. If you go into a technical discussion in the boardroom, you're likely to lose people, right? And
Yeah.
if you do that a few times, right, it's probably not great for your career. But there is a way out of it, right? There is a way out of it, and that's to create kind of a different kind of objective, right? So, I've seen really innovative CISOs and technology leaders, CIOs, right? Like try to do things like, well, calculate a brand percentage impact, right? Or right, something like that, right? Or track revenue directly attributed to security features, right? Or quantify um, the financial impact of prevented incidents, right? The things like that. But that requires a level of sophistication, right? That you have to implement and lead.
Yeah. Wow.
Interesting. Yeah.
Isn't the probably one of the more meaningful conversations for a technology leader trying to convey these KPIs, understanding what the chief operations officer's objectives are?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, it comes down to what type of KPI architecture do you have within your organization, right? You'll typically have, the CEO will create his objectives, and then they'll get passed down to, the direct reports, and then they get passed down to the vice presidents and the directors, and it's something like that, right? And then, unfortunately, it gets lost in translation by the time you get
The
like,
telephone game.
yeah, 3 or 4 levels down, right? And so there's a lot of work that can be done to really align those objectives all the way through, right? But suffice it to say, that's a different problem, right? But really, I think what you're getting to is the objectives need to be communicated in terms of business value, not necessarily in terms of technical.
Well, it was also in terms of you there were KPIs that people were trying to work their way into with a variety of gymnastics that weren't necessarily valuable to the organization to demonstrate value of the effort. Where probably having that conversation with the operations and the impact to operations, the security controls might put into place to either impede operations efficiency or increase operational efficiency and efficacy. That push and pull isn't clearly understood. So the KPIs are getting muddled into things they think might be impressive, but then aren't necessarily impressive or meaningful to the organization
Yeah.
as KPIs.
Well, but
Yeah.
from also from the technologist point of view, I work from the bottom upwards now. It's like, look, my language, my vocabulary is all about technical solution because I need to spend so much time to learn all of that, to translate that to the executive. How can I learn your language when I have to manage my language? And of course, we have been talking about this, like the acronym battles. Now within the GRC, there's another set of vocabulary, acronyms that I have to learn. But I'm not necessarily a lawyer, or I don't have that kind of background. Well, how can I translate that? Where would be the upper management's role would be in that sense to make it clear for the custodians down below who manages on a day-to-day basis, and when they have no clue what the subcontrol of the NIST CSF 2.0 is referring to. So that's kind of make it challenging. And then how can I utilizing the system data that to correlate with that and put it into the context?
Look, I think that all executives have this same challenge, right? I think it's a little more acute in technology, but right, if you're the CFO, right, you're dealing with accounting terms all day long, right? And then you have to come back and explain some concept to your fellow executives on the board. Okay, so it's not just technology leaders. So I think I think it's not a bad thing if somebody wants to stay in the technical space, but at the senior levels around a boardroom table, the skills that got you to that position are rarely the skills that are going to help you, propel you to that next level. And so in a way, the technical experience opens the doors, right? It allows you to keep your role, right? And but your leadership excellence will allow you to go further. And so that's kind of my segue, right, into the top leadership skills that I think technology leaders need, and in fact all leaders. Um,
And
I
in
think,
fact,
Stanley, that
yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say, I think what Bob's talking about is really kind of illustrated by the results of Oxford University and their study, where 72% of CEOs are uncertain as to what to do about cybersecurity, although they know it's a top priority for the organization. Well, Bob's speaking directly to that. They're uncertain about what to do about cybersecurity because everybody keeps coming to them from a technical perspective, and they don't understand it, and so they're left sort of ambivalent as to what to do. I know I need to do something, but I don't know what to do. I don't have the right information. I don't have the right indicators for our organization for me to make a decision as to which way to move.
And which is a good segue into one of the comments from our audience is, quantitative and qualitative KPIs,
Mm-hmm.
and ties directly to the organization's goals and objective. Of course, this is all, why we're talking about from the top down perspective. Now, again, being the devil's advocate, I'm a technologist, I've been doing this for so long. It's like sometimes it's like, look, I got enough to manage, but can you translate those quantitative and qualitative KPIs? All I wanted to do is just, look, I'm going to continue to work on the technology solution because daily I'm getting, false positive, hundreds of security incidents. I'm not the good person to define those objectives. Now, but at the same token, well, that's what the board or the executive aide, that's what you get paid for, Stanley. Go
Yep.
figure it out.
Yep.
Right? And that's where we talking about the 5 C's. Communication is broken down. I lack of the collaboration because I don't have a clear objective coming from the top down. So I have to continue to work on it from the bottom up perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
that lost the collaboration with my vendor, the third party risk, which we're not even touching yet, then goes into, and that leads into the customizations of it. What I mean by the customization is now how do we define this top down and bottom up approach? Even though, yes, we understand the framework, we understand the narrative, everybody wants to change the culture with, basically security awareness education and all of that. Everybody agrees with that. But that customization, we lost that translation because from legal to technical language, it never collide or correlated. Then it needs into the customer. Now we see the customers demanding the compliance requirement. We talk about CMMC for quite some time. It's like, well, I'm a small business. I'm in the level 1 of CMMC, but you ask me, great, I got to do the self attestations, but I have no idea. I know I got all these tools I already pay for, but I have no idea how to correlate that for my customers' compliance requirement. Again, go back into the communication gap. And then the last part of it is now this ecosystem that we all working together, it has been collapsed because of the insurance company. They don't even know what to do with us. We keep on paying on an annually on this premium. Our just got double. What Forget about asking them why they double, they just go and here's the test, and I'm going to double the cost. So this now it becomes very costly all around, again going into the cybersecurity black holes. This 5C framework And now we still go back into the communication step. You know, you guys are the business executive. I'm the technologist. Please show me, what should I do?
What do you say, Bob?
Well, I actually wrote a book on the topic. So,
Ah, very good. That's what we are. Now let's pry into the content of your book.
yeah, exactly. So, I was having kind of a lot of trouble communicating to my clients how they should proceed. And I basically came up with a methodology that I give away for free, and Stanley can give you the link later
Okay.
to the book. But it basically talks about 5 key skills that technology leaders need to develop, and no one talks about them. These are not, occasionally you'll talk about communication, collaboration, and that kind of falls into the first skill, which is really important. It's emotional intelligence, and it's really understanding and managing emotions, of yourself, and first, you got to do you first, and then others, right? That's really key. The second key skill is assertiveness. So think of that as, not being a jerk, right? But standing firm on critical decisions and maintaining a relationship with someone, while at the same time being direct with them and advocating for yourself, right? So that's a really you know sometimes requires some nuance there,
Yeah.
right? And then there's the third skill is executive presence. So that's, we talked a little bit about that earlier, projecting confidence, right? When you go into that crisis junkie mode, right, that so many technology executives, right, are caught in. Look, I'm not saying anything that I've not done myself, right? So I'm a poster child for this stuff. But when you go into this crisis junkie mode, you're not projecting confidence and credibility. You can't
No.
communicate with impact, right? Because you're not maintaining composure under pressure. People want to see, to have confidence. They got to see that you have confidence, and you have this composure
Right.
when things aren't going that well. And then finally, the last two are creativity, right? That's the innovation component, and really the final is influence, right? So that's shaping outcomes without relying on your formal authority. And that's a big one as well. So
Oh,
there's a lot
wonderful.
in
I
there.
mean, yes, and for us is, from NetSwitch perspective, when we engage, we make it more practical with the three steps approach. Knowing the unknown. And one part of we just talked about in our ops meetings today, it's like, now there is a lot of IP address when you do the scanning, when you do the inventory, pen testing, the IoT device, we don't even know what device that they have in the network itself. We don't, we see those IP addresses, but where are they? So that's kind of the knowing the unknown. Well, how can we knowing the unknown? That ties in into your emotional intelligence, because when we talk to the IT folks below the management level that they manage this, the first question was that, well, am I going to have my job now? Because you guys are coming in. That impacts the emotion,
Yeah.
right? It's real. Everybody's, oh, I might, well, you got Bob coming in here, you got, Nest Switch coming in here. Am I going to keep my job? And now that goes into that collaboration, the second C. Well, how can we communicate? Look, we're not here to take your job away, because there's so much needs to be done. Doesn't matter what level in the organization. Don't worry about it. We are here to help. That's why we're going into the second step, which is the building block. We just need to find out what is out in your current environment as a baseline assessment. Then we can determine, well, how can we put this block brick by brick or how do we fill in the gap between the breaks, which you already have purchased, money already spent, and lesson had learned. Well, now how can we fill in the gaps between the breaks? Not necessarily need to build another 50 feet wall, 50 feet wall. We just need to focus on that 5 feet. How can we strengthen it? How can we make it efficient? And that's what, Bob, that you had touched on about the SARA, which is security automation and risk assessment. So first step, baseline assessment. Second step, building block. And then the third step is how can we continue to customize to measure the effectiveness of the operation. And then go back into the earlier point of, well, you know what? Hey, this tool that we're using, it's only really contributing 10% of the effectiveness. Well, do we want to take that away? Do we want to replace it? Or can we just get rid of it altogether? That 10%, it might becomes part of the 80-20 rule, might becomes 80% of the risk that is being sitting in there. Nobody had paid attention. It's been there for several years. It might have some need, but how can we, with the latest technology, how can we address those, and make it more efficient with the newer technology? So that's part of what, go back into the customization, is the reallocating of the resources to make it more adaptive strategy. And that's how we work with, from the 3-step to Sarah, how can we push it into the security automation and continue to measure the risk. Now we have some metrics, then we can talk to you, Bob, so you can translate that into the legal language with the business executive.
Well, I don't think you want me transferring it into legal language.
See, now we're going back and forth, it's like, finger pointing now.
Yeah, yeah. I think my lawyer would object, but
Well, and just to kind of put, not being push you on the spot, but that you're right, and that's part of it. Why we have to build the ecosystem.
Right.
Why we working Nest, which is vigorously working with university, across the globe, is really to try to, leverage our ecosystem, which we have some of the, lawyers in our ecosystem. Well, how do you define that? We not necessarily have to engage in the, full-time perspective, but fractional engagement, and why it's necessary to build out this community, and exactly why we are here as a cyber risk governance. And every month or every other month, we also bring in this subject matter expertise into our roundtable, exactly to dive into
Yep.
this type of issues. Look, you know what? Hey, lawyers, like now, we got to pass the buck to the lawyers. Well, but sometimes they just need to define it once for that organization. Sometimes it's just to open up this communications and let the business management to say, okay, you know what is our risk appetite? Can we do without the legal support, or do we feel comfortable to take on this risk? As long as, from the technologist point of view, tied it back into the bottom of the rack, I come in, hey, as long as you think it's okay to manage on our own, I don't mind to do what I'm doing every day. I'll continue to do what I do. As long as you just tell me this is something that you are aware of from the business, from the top management perspective or middle
Yeah.
management perspective. And we would have a more holistic approach onto this, and an unbiased approach onto this. And again, of course, that we got to sell a little bit here. That's why we put together this open source called Unity Risk Indicator, is to able to utilize. It's not perfect. There is no perfect in the cybersecurity world. And go back into your, you mentioned about at one point the perfectionist. Such technologists always try to pursue that perfectionist and being perfect, but at the same time, there is no such thing, because technology keep on evolving. The criminal keep on evolving. Today, we might doing 100% into whatever the upper management looking for from the metrics perspective. Tomorrow will change. And that's why we have to focus on the adaptive strategy, and ties it back into your inference. I'm going to jump to that last point that you're talking about, inferencing. And that, as a technology, I'm hoping that you are giving me that inference so I can continue to do the right thing for the organization, because I'm just looking at the system data. That's all I care about. And of course, some of them cannot even look at the system data to extract those data, to measure it, being in the quantitatively, tied it back into the qualitative and quantitative, not even having this quantitative discussion. Forget about qualitative, because if garbage in, garbage out, if from the quantitative conversation, we cannot even agree on that communication, you agree on the description down to the scope of work, then whatever that we putting in as our effort collectively, it's going to go into the wrong direction.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, again, so this is why we are here, is as an ecosystem. Again, going back into your subject matter expertise. As a technologist company, as a technology company, we want to continue to adapt what is the latest technology to make the cost efficient, including security automation. And then, of course, go lead into hyper automation with AI tools that is available, but it keep on changing. But on the other hand, human in the loop, what we refer as augmented intelligence, is so critical to making sure that we are doing the right thing. And this is where I'm going to pass the, you know, pass the bucks back to you, Bob. How would you work from your previous CIO role to translate that with the business executive based on your book?
Yeah, well, I think that AI has a lot of promise, but it's not there yet, right? And there are a lot of point solutions that are delivering a lot of value and are making people more efficient in the way they do their job. So, I certainly think agentic AI is starting to create kind of better thinking humans. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about, okay, well, I'm going to have just AI write this next email that I've got. That will look, that does help. It does teach people how to write better emails, right? And that's great. Okay. But it can help a an analyst, okay, go through their thinking
Hmm.
and go through a process of asking a bunch of questions to the AI and then answering, forcing themselves to answer them, right? And if the person does the work, then they're gonna find that they improve in a number of different ways,
Yeah.
right? They'll improve, right? They'll improve in their thought speed. I mean, right? I'm not just saying let the AI do all the work. Actually, go through the thinking. The AI asks you the question, you answer it back. Then,
Right.
then you have a dialogue with it. You can get a lot farther than you used to be able to. Okay, we have to call everybody together in this meeting and have a dialogue that way, right? There's still a place for that, right? But it allows you to basically figure out if you've got all kinds of problems in your thinking up front, and basically not expose that. Yeah.
And I think that ties in perfectly what Sean has told me about AI is his intern.
Yes.
It will continue to learn over time, as long as the algorithm, whatever open AI and all those companies doing the right thing. But we still have to check our interns work. We still have to check the junior level workforce, making sure that they are meeting the objective for the organization, and which is, I spend a lot of time working with these interns, mentees on that in that perspective, and actually showing them on what you're talking about, Bob, is how can we build this process together using the AI, and Nest, which we call it AI square. Artificial intelligence is great for the speed, and augmented intelligence or human in the loop is for the accuracy. So, Sean, if you want to
Right.
elaborate on that, please do.
Yeah, it's if you're not using clear instructions to what you want back, you're not going to get a good conversation. You were saying about if you don't ask the right questions, if you don't have the right kind of dialogue, and really, as Stanley was just describing, the AI for the speed and the augmented intelligence for the human interaction, it still requires that security engineer, the IT specialist, the technical specialist, to be able to have that conversation for it to ask the right questions to get the person to think about how does this apply to me? How does this apply to our organization? Am I able to deliver a value? Am I able to deliver a solution that doesn't impact our organization? Because the AI doesn't know your organization.
Mhm.
You know the organization, and it still requires an ability to have critical thought that a human's going to have to be able to make those decisions for that augmented intelligence. Because if we just let AI go on automatic pilot, we're going to have a lot of organizations with problems, and we've seen that before. So,
And to go back into the circle where we're starting off is using the metrics, right? So we work with
right,
AIs creating those metrics, but not necessarily those, even the metrics or the code that associate whatever generative AI come back, it's going to be accurate. So that ties in into the university, academic level, government level, AI ethical, AI governance, and AI explainability. And those three areas still being worked on. And I agree with you, Bob. It's like, you know what, AI, it's a great tool, but it's not ready. So when this, maybe I should turn this question to you. What do you mean by not ready? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because everybody wants to talk about AI. Our marketing expert keeps saying, okay, we're going to talk about AI. Okay, so let's talk about it. But I have nothing, you know, not yet, I should say, because we're still working with the AI, with the modeling, with the, human in the loop, and what we refer as domain specific. There is still a big gap on the domain specific related to that. That's my comment, but now I would like
Yeah.
to hear yours.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about the Gartner hype cycle, right? Um, we're kind
Yeah,
of
we were one of the victims.
right. We're about to right. Yes,
yep,
we're about to. I think go down into that valley of despair pretty soon on AI, and that's just because right the expectations and the marketing have been so off the charts. Hey, where's my self-driving car yet? And
right,
I have this smart home, but like my app doesn't work, and and it doesn't work with LED lights, and whatever, right? So there's there's a lot of challenges, right, to get to that point. But the way these cycles work, right, is a lot of expectations are created very high, right? And then you realize that it isn't all there yet. And then people start to figure it out, right? So right now we're at the point of point solutions, right? Where
right,
we can basically take certain workflows in organizations and automate them with a fair degree of effectiveness, right? And we can use
yeah,
AI to do that. Okay, but when they say, "Oh yeah, well the AI will write the app from start to finish for you and be totally, perfect," well, okay, you're no, no,
And the
that's not.
interesting point that it Cohen I'm keep thinking about the couple points that you talk about is the emotion and the behavior. And the first part of the emotion is, back then the old guys like me talking about fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yeah,
Now it's the female fear of missing out. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna, the new workforce come in, say I'm fearing of missing out. I got to use AI. I got to tell my boss to use AI. but in the same token, is that part of tied into the behavior in how they're interacting with AI that could put organization into in jeopardizing the organization's
Yeah.
business objective? That's a question for both of you. Do you think that it might, because of the fear of missing out, people rushing into it and then going into tiding into, oh, I'm going to got to use this tool because it's going to help my job, work faster. I'm going to protect
Yeah.
my job. Would
Yeah,
you think
look,
that?
it's a big trend. People want to get aligned with it, right? Okay, but at the end of the day, it comes back to business value. And what are we going to do with this? I'll just call it a tool, right?
A
This
Hmm.
toy?
this AI tool, right, to create business value. Okay, so can I can I automate part of my workforce and then reduce the cost by having automation there? Or right, can I improve customer service by implementing chatbots
Chatbots,
and right,
yeah.
exactly, right, and you there's but it comes down to business skills. Okay, can you do a business case? Okay, what is that business case based on? If we're now going to replace 1,000 CS call center representatives with an AI, okay, how is that going to work? Is it going to deliver the benefits? How much do I have to cost? Oh, did I just spend more money in licensing fees than all of those CSRs cost? Well, no, then that's not a business case, right? So it's there's unfortunately there's hard work associated with developing a business case, and that hard work needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain amount of upfront costs that aren't necessarily being looked at. To your point, Bob, when you're looking at replacing a bunch of CSs in a call center, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that needs to be conveyed into that AI in order to be able to ask every potential question a customer may ask,
Yes.
because at some point they're going to ask, and having run a company with a customer service and a call center, customers come up with some of the weirdest questions, and you wouldn't necessarily have thought of it ahead of time to train your AI to answer these types of questions. And then I think back to when everything sort of broke out. It was last year at some point. There was a car dealership that had an AI chatbot on its site, and a person out there, had a conversation with the chatbot and got it to agree to sell the car for $1. And it held up in court because the company, the AI chatbot, represented the dealership, and it was a contract to sell the vehicle for $1. Brand new
And that
vehicle off the lot.
ties it back into exactly the risk, right? So Sean, you and I talk about, the
Yep.
NIST 8286, which is integrating cybersecurity and enterprise risk management, right? Is
Right.
the really the risk management. Of course, we more focus on to the cyber risk management. And of course, we just had another conversation with another institute focusing on risk management. And this is part of what I want to lead into the conversation to go back into from the top down perspective, governance, risk, and
Right.
compliance, and how do we measure in the more cost effective way. Is one thing is we need, from a technologist point of view, from a vendor point of view, we need the management to think about that customization. What is their risk appetite? Even though it might not be necessarily measurable, but it needs to start the communication and then collaborating with the existing and their third party vendor and the supplier chain and all that risk management aspect of it. But
Right.
just to define that, and that's where, Bob, of course, where your expertise comes in and starting that conversation from the top down. Now, how can we look at what we already have invested in our existing infrastructure solutions, tools, including the talent skill set that we already in place, well, then we can identify the gap and let's prioritize based on those gaps, and which is nothing new, has been doing that for years. But more importantly, tied it back into our original conversation is KPI. Well, how can we put together a set of KPI and start continuously measuring and monitoring those KPI, and then applying the adaptive strategy to continue to work on this. Now, there's a lot of work, what I just said, right, Bob?
It's
and
not
tie it
plug
back
and
into
play.
and tie it back into what you talked about earlier. It's like we give out the book and call business impact analysis. We sharing the data visualization tool, looking at the holistic and unbiased approach and utilizing it's all of these. It's just early in the stage,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I think this type of communication helps a lot to define those objectives, and that is necessary because, as I said, I mentioned about the cyber insurance cost. That's real. It's coming down hard, and people might not even organization might not even qualify for insurance because, like,
Mhm.
Chubb is one of them. It's like, oh, if you don't do a penetration testing, we know if we don't even consider your application. That sets the tone already in the larger enterprise. And I think that with AI being the cyber criminals' favorite tool right now, this is just going to speed up to push it down to the mid-sized company, push it down to the smaller company, and the smaller company cannot even address that because they don't even have any resource to do it.
Hmm.
And that's why that we starting this kind of conversation with some of the small nonprofit university work and the local community to start talking about this, and then utilizing open source tools, which in Europe is emphasizing that already. And as the AI continue to mature, let's just put this aside because a small company cannot even afford that, and because they don't have the human resource to adapt into that new technology. Even mid-size would need to be sitting and waiting it out and what is good, what is bad for themselves. But going back into what we emphasizing on the open source tools and the open source community, look, Red Hat sold to IBM for what, $16 billion. They started from an open source, support type of engagement. They didn't invent, Linux operation system. They just providing the support to that. What is your challenge, Bob, that when you talk to the business executive, how would they see that as a value, or do they see it as a threat in the open source community?
Well, it really depends on the organization. There are a lot of companies that basically make the decision that they're going to go down an open source route, right? And then they invest in open source kinds of capabilities, right? Including people that are familiar with those platforms, right? Because right, see, a lot of this is a platform game, right? Okay,
Yeah.
if you if you're gonna go with Microsoft, Oracle, right, some of the the big boys, right, you might not have the extra cash to basically spool up a bunch of open source platforms as well. Now, some companies are actually very good, right, at they use the open source at the OS level, and then they sometimes buy big company gear and put it on top of that, right? But that's I I just don't see that as much, right?
But
That
it has a lot to do with the open mind, which is emotional intelligent, right?
Oh,
So,
yes, yes, right. Well, yeah, and I think that right, that is a just I don't view that more of an emotional intelligence thing, as it's more of a frankly, it's more of a business case thing. I mean, I used to say, use the term. I did. By the way, is Computer World still out there? Because I used to.
I don't think so.
I don't. Right. Yeah. I used to. There was that this
You
magazine.
just dated yourself, Bob, which is
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. You know, and I used to say it's Computer World itis, Computer World, because basically,
Let me check my Palm Pilot, Bob.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. There you go.
yeah.
Exactly. And uh, that was a great platform, the first great mobile platform. Um, the but it really becomes you know, if you can keep your footprint smaller, right, then you can reduce a lot of your infrastructure costs. And every time you add a new platform without deprecating one, you basically are, you know, are creating technical debt. So, you know, I think that becomes a big challenge for leaders because they wanna adopt the latest stuff, right? But then they still have major applications running on old things, and it's hard to pay for both of them. Um, so
Yeah, the
it's
technical debt is a very interesting part because this is a case that addressing, and we got a couple comments. I'm going to address that
yeah,
too. So
sure.
just tied it into a case study about the open source back into that. When we engage with one of our customers, and this customers, we work with them for 25 years until they sold the company. Out of that 25 years, I instigated two open source solutions for them years ago, right? I'm dating myself again. One is the Asterisk telephone system, because that's where I came from the telecom system. I said, you know what? Why buy those big brand name when you're a mid-sized company? Let's use an Asterisk system.
I've I've used it before a long time
Yep.
ago though.
Yeah, and then the second part is really the firewall, the PF
Yeah.
Sense. We've been using that and deployed that. And I think that ties it into Sarah. Thank you for the comment about the open source. Yes, people were so concerning about, well, it's open source. It is now publicly available. Anybody can pick a hole and find a way to exploit this open source tool so it can get hacked. Yes, you right on in that comment, but now that's why we put our open source tool into GitHub security. We have to rely on a third party to making sure that our work is done properly, accurately, without the vulnerability. Well, how do I know that Microsoft, Google, the big boys are doing the similar type of work and leveraging crowdsourcing in a sense to identify their vulnerability? We see Microsoft has been day in day out how many patches it come up, how many vulnerabilities is being identified. They have got a huge target on their back all the time. Same thing with Google, same thing with all those big platforms. Well, it might help from a technology debt perspective, and now we just need to train up the staff, which is ourselves. Well, how can we using more of an automations to making sure that is constantly being vetted? And there are plenty of tools out there. For example, we've been advocating Center for Internet Security for years, and then utilizing their configuration assessment as part of the tool to continue to vet it out. You know what? Trust but verify. So our verification process is an ongoing, it's not going to stop, because now we can afford to help our customer to deploy those open source tools to do the verification process in a and the automation fashion on a daily basis. Comparing to back then, we have to do a vulnerability every 3 months or whatever. Now we can do it on a daily basis if we want to get into the level of on the OS level. We can do it on a daily device level on a daily basis. Now also that I'm going to make another comment because we only got 2 minutes, because Steve, our friend Steve, has talked about he used a similar term called IA, which is intelligence augmentation, to tie it back into the AI community, which is exactly what we've been talking about with the AI squad. Well, in some senses, talking about is fabricating his comment, I'm just going to make it short. Fabricating using technology rooted in the AI, but also utilizing our team, the collaboration effort, including the third party vendor, to continue to vet on these processes to making sure that AI is doing the right thing. I hope that I got Steve's comment correctly. And Sean, you're a better translator than I am. So
It was close enough.
okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Steve, for your comment. And we got a minute, few seconds left. Bob, any final comments on
Yeah,
this
hey,
live event?
so Stanley and Sean, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'll leave you with the leaders I think that are going to thrive in today's environment aren't just technically proficient; they're strategically focused and emotionally intelligent, right? And that helps them become more business aligned. And I've created the technology leadership blueprint specifically for tech executives. Just go ahead and shoot me a direct message on LinkedIn. I'll send you a link to it. It's free, right? Connect with me on LinkedIn. And but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you, Bob. We'll put
Great.
that on there. And for the audience, we're building a new microsite to put in aggregating all these, expert opinions and white paper and ebooks onto a single site. Just give us a little bit more time while we're working on that. And thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate your
Thanks, everybody.
time and talk to you next time. Thank you, Bob.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Sean.
Thanks, Bob.
Take care. Bye. Okay.